I will say, describing this game always feels like so controversial. It is creepy. It is creepy.
It might have been in the blink of an eye, but shockingly enough, the Earth has revolved once again, half-revolved. The Earth has half-revolved once again around the Sun. 6 months have passed by since the beginning of this year, and it is time to reminisce and contemplate all the good memories made with all the new games I tried, and select my favorite picks, you know? Ciao, my name is Alessandro, but you can call me 𝗪𝗓𝗓𝗧𝗪, and as you might have understood from the title, it's not that difficult to guess. Today we're gonna be discussing some of the games that I tried this year that are new to me, and I'm gonna be telling you what are my favorite ones. What a peculiar choice, Alessandro. Why are you doing this in the middle of the year? I mean, I could just do one at the end of the year, just like all the normal people, but then I would get overwhelmed with all the games that I want to talk about, and I don't have the time to talk about because I don't want to post a 4 hours documentary about board games on YouTube, you know? Who wants to see me talk for 4 hours anyways? Like, do you want to self-inflict this kind of pain? I don't think so. Before starting with the whole listing and chatting and blubbering about games, a couple of disclaimers because I just like to disclaim stuff. First disclaimer, I'm not too big on the cult of the new, like I don't back the latest Kickstarter, I don't really do a lot of new releases most of the times. I will say there are a couple of very new releases in this list because I have friends that back Kickstarters, so that's good enough. I try games, but this list will be about the new to me games that I've tried in 2025. So some of them might be old games for you and could be like way in the past. I hope you're not too mad about it. Also, I don't want to be wasting your time. Maybe you don't want to hear me talk about all the games, but you want to select the games that you actually want me to talk about. And that's why I've included in the chapters of this video and also in the description below the timestamps with all the different positions that I'm gonna be talking about. So you can jump around in the actual video. Now, I will say, at the same time, maybe there's people who don't want spoilers about the ranking and stuff, so I've only listed the positions in the actual chapters of the video, but if you scroll down in the description below, there is the complete ranking. In fact, there is the complete ranking of all the 45 games that I've tried in a link in the description below at some point, but you will see the top 10 with the honorable mention already in the description. You just need to read the description. I know it can be annoying. I'm sorry if that's annoying to you. I'm trying to satisfy the people who want spoilers, people who don't want spoilers, the people who want to see the full ranking. You know, diversify. If any of these things are missing in the captions or chapters, it is because I might have messed up somewhere. And I'm saying this because in one of the latest videos, I did exactly the same disclaimer, and then for some reason the wrong timestamps got pasted. And I was wondering, because at some point I was starting to receive like a lot of I don't like on that video. I was like, what am I doing wrong? What is happening? And then at some point I received a super angry comment about a guy being like, oh my god, you can't blah blah blah, you're wasting my time, place the timestamps correctly, what are you doing and stuff. And it's like, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Then he deleted the comment, but you know, I'm trying not to get anybody mad. Speaking of which, if you don't agree with my rankings, it's fine, I'm a nobody cares about my opinion, don't get mad. We can definitely discuss in the comments below about what you think about some of these games because I like interacting, but please don't get mad. Like, I just want to bring joy and happiness, and you know, you can have a good time watching this video, not get angry, please. Now, one last thing, if you like this kind of videos where I rank stuff, I talk about stuff, I do mini reviews, I talk about the games that surprised me, disappointed me, this kind of stuff, there is in the description below, but also right now I'm showing at the top right corner, a link with a playlist that contains all these kind of videos that I made so far. You can just click on that, browse on what you're interested in. You're gonna find also my very first of this type of video, which I recorded exactly 1 year ago. It was a mid-year review of 2024, and I hope you're gonna see the improvement. If you're watching both of the videos, tell me if you see the improvement. Last but not least, if you like this kind of content, if you like board games, if you like playthroughs, reviews, how to plays and all this kind of stuff, remember that you can always support me by leaving a like, subscribing to my channel, and if you feel extremely generous, you can even support me on Patreon or Ko-fi, tipping me. And I will be Forever grateful, immensely grateful, I would have no words. But now I will have a lot of words for you, because we're gonna start with some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention I will talk about is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, and the reason why this is in the honorable mention is that this is not really like a new to me game. I've tried this game before and I started the campaign back in November, a full campaign, and I ended it recently, so now I can talk about the campaign kind of in full instead of just first impressions from the first scenarios. Just a quick insight into the game. Gloomhaven is a giant title, so I expect a lot of people to know what it is, but in case you don't know what it is a dungeon crawler. So you're going around trying to kill monsters, and how you do it is by playing some of the cards you have in your hand. And the characteristic about this game is that each turn you're gonna select 2 cards to play. Each card has a top and a bottom section with 2 different actions, and from each of the 2 cards you're selecting, you're gonna select one that you're gonna play as your card where you're using the top action and one where you're using the bottom action. And so you have choices to make. Another choice you're gonna have to make is that each card has an initiative number, and that is gonna dictate the order in which all the characters and enemies act during a specific round. So you're gonna have to think about also what is the order of priority, or what could be the expected order of priority of the characters actually acting. This is an insanely fun and new mechanic that I advise everybody to try at least once, or at least watch some videos. But let me tell you, of all the Gloomhaven implementations, and keep in mind I've only tried Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, but I know some of the stuff that happens in the normal Gloomhaven. I'm not sure about Frosthaven, but what I will say is that Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion was the perfect length size for a campaign kind of game like Gloomhaven. I feel like it didn't overstay its welcome, because it can get a little bit repetitive as a game, because you're basically trying to do almost always the same thing, which is killing monsters. Sometimes you're also trying to reach some objectives, but still it can be a little bit repetitive. There is a solo only game which is called Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs, and I did not like that basically at all. It is way too puzzly, it doesn't leave any room for mistakes, at least in my opinion, and I got a little bit frustrated because in Gloomhaven, whenever you don't succeed in a scenario, you have to try it over and over again. And I was a little bit tired of the whole concept of having to do a scenario like 7 times before actually succeeding. Please keep in mind, this does not happen in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. There is room for mistake, and you still have a good potential of success. I think we had to retry officially 1 scenario, 2 because at some point we had to cut off a scenario in the middle, and so we had to replay it, but just because we didn't have time to complete it. But officially we only had to replay 1 scenario. So of the 20 that we played, we didn't have to replay that much. Replaying a scenario can be extremely disheartening and frustrating. The one thing I really liked was the progression of the characters. You're evolving your characters almost every time, getting the experience, getting new items, and getting stuff. So that is what keeps the game fresh and very fun, because the mechanic is almost always the same. So if you're on the fence and you have like some people you can play the game with that would take on a campaign that is like 20 scenarios, I would definitely consider this as one of the options, because it is very unique and I think it doesn't get stale. It's a very good game. We all really liked it a lot. The second honorable mention I want to talk about is Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, and this is kind of the same concept. We are in the middle of campaign. I have not completed the campaign, so I don't know everything about the game. It is an explorative open world kind of game where you basically go around the map, interact with some exploration tokens, read a lot of paragraphs from storybooks of some riddles, but in general what you're gonna try to achieve is getting some totems, crafting some totems, and to do that you need some rare materials that you're gonna be collecting by exploring over and over again. We're definitely having a lot of fun. It is definitely like a cozier game. It has some combat, and I would say the combat in this particular implementation of Sleeping Gods, which is the Distant Skies, it is very fun because you're using some combat cards, so it feels like a fun puzzle. I will also say probably I'm not a big fan of the multiplayer rules of this game. I would probably have preferred to be able to use the solo rules also in multiplayer. But if you're looking for a different game, something more like open world, explorative, a lot of story to read and absorb and trying to understand what each exploration will lead to, it is definitely on the cozier side despite some of the combats. I 100% suggest this game. Now, if you want to have an idea of how actually Sleeping Gods works, I have a lot of playthroughs of Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril, which is kind of a mini implementation of actual Sleeping Gods, and it has a lot of the rules of the Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, which are different from the rules of the original Sleeping Gods, by the way. So you're gonna find those playthroughs at the link showing right now at the top right corner, and I think you can watch that. You will have absolutely no spoilers for what will be Distant Skies, and if you like the kind of vibe from those playthroughs, then you will know that you will like Distant Skies even more, because Distant Skies is definitely more rich than Primeval Peril, which was a little bit limited, but it was supposed to be just a trial for the game, right? Let you try the game, see if you actually like the mechanics about it. Another honorable mention is one of the newest releases of this year. It is called Deep Regrets. And it's a game all about fishing, and you wanna fish the best fishes out in the sea to collect them as trophies and score a lot of victory points at the end of the game. But there's a catch. The deeper you go into the sea, the more victory points you're gonna be able to score, but the more likely will it be for you to find some foul abominations, some aberrations of the sea. And you will still be able to score a lot of points from them. You will still be able to sell them as fish or mount them as trophies. But this is gonna be heavy on your conscience, because you're gonna start regretting bringing these abominations in the world. And that's how you collect regrets. And at the end of the game, the player with the most regrets will have to lose a bunch of victory points. So you wanna be mindful of how much regrets you're gonna collect throughout the game. You don't want to have a too heavy heart. This is basically a push your luck kind of game where you're out in the world, rolling some dice, trying to fish fishes, hoping to find something that scores you a lot of victory points, but sometimes you're gonna find some surprises. Sometimes they're gonna bring you joy, abilities, but also unexpected penalties. It is all about trying to balance out how much regrets you're actually able to take without being the player with the most regrets at the end of the game and having to suffer a horrible penalty. The good of this game is definitely like the amazing art and the fun, silly mechanics. It's just a very lightweight game. It's simple, it's easy to understand, it's not that deep, despite the name. But it still has a lot of moving parts that you can fiddle with and try to optimize your luck somehow. The reason why this is an honorable mention, it is because it didn't land in my top 10, and the reason why it didn't land in my top 10 is that I found it a little bit too long for how simple of a game it is theoretically, and also I found some rules to be not explicitly clear. I have found while playing it a lot of ambiguities here and there, and that has made like the experience for me a little bit more frustrating, because you never know how to actually like make a lot of components interact together. I don't know, the rules weren't super clear. The rulebook was a little bit frustrating for me. I would definitely love to play this game more and more. It actually landed just below the top 10, so it's not like I didn't like it. Otherwise it wouldn't be an honorable mention. So it's definitely a game that I encourage you to try, and it is fun, but keep in mind it might be longer than you think, and sometimes the rules might be not super straightforward. The last honorable mention I want to talk about, it is Penguin Party. And honestly, I just wanted to mention like a super fun but super light kind of game. I usually mention like super heavy games, and I wanted to give a little bit of a twist here. Something to play in 15 minutes that you still are able to enjoy. Because it plays so quickly and it's so cute. The goal of this game is basically building a pyramid of penguins, and there's very little rules. At the beginning of the game, you distribute all the cards among all players, and then during their turn, each player has to play a card. The cards are penguin cards that can be of like 5 different colors, and the only rule for placement is that if you're playing a penguin not on the base of the pyramid, which is limited to 8 spots, you will have to place the penguin on top of at least 2 penguins at the base, you know, just like a pyramid, a triangle. There's gonna be 2 penguins and 1 on top. And the one you're placing on top has to be at least of a matching color of one of the 2 at the base. So if I have a purple and a blue, on top I can place either purple or a blue. As simple as that. Despite it being simple, it can create a lot of fun strategies, because you're basically gonna be trying to block other players from being able to play cards, because if their turn comes and they don't have any cards they are actually legally allowed to play, they have to pass and they're gonna score a bunch of negative points for not being able to play some of the cards. For full transparency, this game has been sent to me from the publisher, but what I think about it is still unbiased. It is a game that all my friends always request me to bring along for a quick filler. It's usually non-gamers kind of friends, so they don't like to play heavy games, but it's a game that really conquered the hearts of a lot of my non-gamer friends. But if you want to know more about this game, I have played it on this channel. You will find the link showing right now at the top right corner of the screen. You can click on it and check out this quick little cute silly game. Now into the real list. Let's start with our top 10 of my favorite games played in 2025. The first game on this list, at position number 10 we found Tether. This is a competitive card game that can only be played either 2 or 4 players, but I will take the 2-player scenario because I think it was more fun than the 4-player scenario. And the goal of the game is basically creating clusters of numbers, and the numbers will be linked together by adjacency, okay? So you can link a 14 to a 15 or a 14 to a 13. And that's pretty much it. There's gonna be cards with numbers on it, and you're gonna be trying to link the cards so that they have contiguous number, and you're gonna create clusters of cards in this way. But there is obviously more to it. So the players will be sitting at 2 opposite sides of the table, and each player is gonna choose an orientation for how their clusters are gonna grow. So one player will be playing with horizontal growth, and the other with vertical growth on the table. Now this is very important because each card has actually 2 numbers printed on it. One is gonna be at the top and the other is gonna be at the bottom upside down. So that if you basically flip the card upside down, you're gonna have a new number showing up at the top corner. I hope this is clear, but just as an example, if you have a card that has a 13 on top and a 53 at the bottom, it means that that card can either be a 13 or if you flip it, it's gonna be a 53. And since we're sitting at opposite side of the table, this means that if I play a card as a 13 from my side, my opponent will consider that card as a 53. From that perspective. And basically what you can do in your turn is either creating a new cluster, fresh, with 2 contiguous number, and place it on the table, and the cards that you can play are either from your hand or from a public display. Or the alternative is basically exchanging cards with the public display and drawing new cards. Another option you have is obviously attaching cards from your hand or from the public display to some of the cards already in clusters on the table. Make these clusters grow because that's the objective of the game. Each time the clusters reach a certain size in amount of cards that are actually attached to the cluster, you're gonna trigger a scoring. And how to score is pretty simple. You basically draw a rectangle around the cluster and you basically consider the width of the cluster in terms of amount of cards and the height of cards in terms of amount of cards, and the vertical player is gonna score the height of the rectangle and the horizontal player is gonna score the width of the cluster. So if you have a rectangle that has 3 cards vertically and 4 cards horizontally, the horizontal player is gonna score 4 points, the vertical player is gonna score 3, right? Correct? I know it's hard to visualize, but that's how it works. It is a very thinky game because by playing cards and extending your clusters from your perspective, you are opening a lot of possibility for your opponents. So you need to be mindful not only of what you want to connect and how you want to connect your clusters, but you also need to be mindful to not opening too many good opportunities for your opponent. Because one other thing you can do in this game is once there are a lot of clusters on the table, there might be a way in which these clusters are actually gonna connect together, and this is usually one of the killer moves, right? Connecting multiple clusters together is usually gonna score you a lot of points, so you really need to be mindful that by playing specific cards you're not opening the possibility for your opponent to actually do a killer move like that. The end game is triggered in 2 ways. Once you have a cluster that is bigger than 11 cards, that triggers the last scoring of the game, and that is actually gonna trigger the end of the game. Another way in which you're gonna trigger the game is that if in any of the middle game scoring there's gonna be a difference in points between the players of at least 6 points, then the game ends immediately and the player with the most points wins immediately. So you also need to be very careful about middle game scoring because okay, maybe you're setting up your grid and your clusters to have a super killer move, but if you don't score at least a certain amount of points and you let your opponent take too much the lead, you're out. Now I say this is better in 2 players because in 4 it felt a little bit that there was too much connecting, too much extending clusters. It was a little bit too easy to actually do very good moves just because more players have more cards in their hand and so more options. In 2 it felt a little bit more thinky, more puzzly and more tight. Now let me know if you ever heard about this game, if you ever tried this game, and what do you think about it? At position number 9 we find Cubitos, a dice push your luck cubes racing game. Yes, Yes, it is a game about cubes racing on a track and you rolling a lot of dice. This game can be a little bit silly because you're just rolling dice and just hoping for the best, but it can also be extremely strategic in terms of the cubes you actually decide to purchase during the game. But let me explain. Your goal will be to cross the finish line as quickly as possible. If you're the first player to cross the finish line, you win the game. And during your turn, you're gonna be rolling at least 9 dice. And these dice usually have a lot of misses, but sometimes are gonna give you some coins and sometimes are gonna give you some movement. Or sometimes they're gonna give you abilities with their special dice. Yes, because there are a lot of colorful dice that you can purchase from the shop, each with different abilities. And the abilities that each of the dice have will depend on the kind of setting you're deciding, because you can have, for each of the different colors, you're gonna have 7 different rule sets that you can mix and match however you want. There are some recommended sets in the rulebook that you can choose, but again, you're free to do whatever you want, and these will bring the replayability of the game to more than 5 million different possible combinations. So if you're worried about replayability with this game, don't be. And another very good thing about this game is that there's virtually no downtime because everybody can roll their dice at the same time and push your luck at the same time. But now that we have talked about some of the characteristics, let's actually see how the push your luck is actually implemented in this game. During their turn, each player is gonna select at least 9 dice to roll. They could be more under certain circumstances, but let's say 9 dice from their dice pool to roll. And as I said, a lot of the dice in this game have a lot of blank faces, which are referred as misses, while the faces that have at least one symbol are hits. Now here's the push your luck. After rolling your 9 dice, you're gonna take all the hits, place them on your board, and you can push your luck and roll the misses as many times as you want. But here's the catch. If you have at least 3 hits in your pool of hits, then you're risking of busting. And busting happens if, when you're rolling all the misses and all the remaining dice, if you get again all misses and no hits at all, then you bust. Which means you're basically skipping the next phase of the turn, which is the one where you're actually purchasing more dice, moving on the board, and doing all the fun stuff and lucrative stuff. Now there is a catch-up mechanics for people who actually bust. There's multiple catch-up mechanics so that people that are left behind, they're not excluded from the game. So there are ways in which sometimes busting can be beneficial, especially in early game. But after everybody has busted or is satisfied with what they've rolled, you proceed into the run phase, where you're basically like moving your pawn on the track, participating in the race, and using all the coins collected during their turn to buy and purchase more dice. And each different colored dice can have different prices depending on the set of dice available on the market with your game configuration. And this game is super fun because it's just pure chaos, everybody rolling a bunch of dice hoping for luck to be on their side. And as I said, nobody really feels super frustrated by being behind because there are certain catch-up mechanics that will help you in future turns do better. This is totally a great family game in my opinion. You can definitely play with people of all ages, and I think everybody's gonna have a blast with this game. It's silly, so it's not the most strategic of games, but it is extremely fun. Have you played Cubitos? Do you know it? What do you think about it? Let me know. At position number 8 we find 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗓, which has soon become my preferred choice for like 2 players collaborative game. It is reasonably quick, it's only like 45 to 60 minutes, but it is highly strategic. It is a well-delving game, kinda like a little bit of some early dungeon crawlers, you know, one deck dungeons kind of vibe. And the objective is getting through a whole deck of challenges called the well deck, and once you reach the bottom of the well, you can actually face the master of the well, which is kinda like a boss. And if you're able to defeat the boss, you win the game. In the meantime, you're gonna try to keep your health high because all the players share a common health pool of 10. And there could be other cards here and there that will make you lose the game with specific conditions. But let's take it one thing at a time. So the first thing I want to mention is that there are 3 boxes out there for this game at the moment, and each box comes with 2 seekers, which are the characters you're going to be controlling, and each with their respective decks, and 1 master. Each master comes with their well deck, and basically each master has 3 different alternative cards to increase replayability. So each time you play, you might be playing against the same master, but a slightly different version of it, and you're gonna select this one randomly. And this only really matters in the final battle, because otherwise during the whole well delving part of the game, the master is gonna be the same, is gonna have the same abilities. But once you get to the bottom of it and you're gonna have to face it, it might have some different abilities at that time. How do you get to the bottom of the well, you're wondering? Well, this is a card game, another card game. Each card in the well deck is gonna represent a challenge, and challenges can be found in 3 different colors: green, blue, or red. At any time during the game, you will always have 4 challenges to choose among, to try and overcome, you know? So you're gonna have 4 different options. Each challenge will have a certain difficulty level, which is the amount of progress you're gonna put on the card to actually overcome it. But it might also have some abilities that trigger the moment the card is put into play, or some passive abilities that are always active until the card is in play. And trust me, the passive abilities can be extremely nasty at times. Now, during their turn, the active player is allowed to play 1 card from their hand and attempt one of the challenges. And the card has to match the color of the challenge that is being attempted. So if I'm attempting a green challenge, I need to play a green card. And each player card will have a number that is gonna represent how much progress you're actually gonna be putting towards that challenge that is being attempted, and will also have different abilities that can trigger once you play it. This number value, which is the progress you're gonna be placing, can be boosted by other players. So other players can sacrifice some of their cards from their hand to use their boost value, which is a different value that is still written on the card, to help you overcome the challenge with more progress, basically contributing to the challenge attempt. These dice can have different color faces depending on the colors of the challenges, and you're gonna be counting how many of the dice will match the color of the challenge you're attempting. So if I'm attempting a green challenge, I will count how many green faces of the dice I have rolled. And then you basically sum up all these values. You sum up the base value of your card, the boost values, the number of the dice that matches your challenge color, and you come up with a number. If this number is enough to overcome the difficulty of the challenge is overcome and you gain the reward value for overcoming the challenge, which is usually delving faster into the deck, which is discarding cards from the top of the well deck into a discard pile. And this is how you speed up going through the huge stack of cards, which is the well deck. But if you fail, you will suffer the consequences for failing that challenge, which is usually losing some health. The progress you have put on the challenge will stay on the challenge, making it easier to overcome for next time, so you're gonna need less progress to actually overcome the challenge in a later turn. But basically every time you fail a challenge, you will have to suffer the consequences for failing that challenge. Now, the most unique thing about this game is that the players don't automatically replenish their hands once they take their turns or end their turns or anything like that. You need to actively decide to replenish your hand, or you will automatically replenish your hand once you run out of cards from your hand. But this will cost you something terrible. You will have to draw an exhaustion cards, and exhaustion cards are horrible, have horrible consequences, and most times introduce either passive effects that are active until the exhaustion card is removed and discarded, or will introduce new ways for you to lose the game. So you wanna limit a lot the amount of times you're gonna be drawing from the exhaustion deck. You wanna be very smart about it. As I said, once you get to the bottom of the well, you're gonna be facing the well master, and in that case you will have to make the well master vulnerable to some specific colors by overcoming some challenges called gauntlet cards. But the core mechanic of the game is the same. You play cards, you place progress on cards, place progress on the actual well master, and once you overcome the well master with enough progress, you defeated the well master. Like, I know this might seem like another simple dungeon delving kind of game, but it's really like, it feels very unique, especially in the way you play cards and the cards interact with each other and the active and passive abilities and all the little tiny details. Plus the art is stunning, and the fact that you can mix and match all the boxes together, coming up with new combinations of seekers and masters. I really like this game. And for full disclosure again, the publisher has sent me 1 copy of this game, but I already knew and played this game a lot before because a friend had it already, and I always asked her to bring the game along whenever it was just me and her to play, because I really like how it plays at 2 players. So the fact that the publisher sent me a copy is really just a plus for me, because I already really liked the game from before, you know? Anyways, also this one I played on the channel. You can find the link showing right now on the top right corner of the screen if you want to see more in detail how the game works and actually plays and want to see a full playthrough of it. But otherwise, let me know what you think about 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, what are your thoughts on it, if you've ever tried it, if it makes you curious or not, and let's jump into position number 7. At position number 7 we find 𝗓, which is some sort of game that reminds me of like Sushi Go, but with an auction mechanic. Now, I'm not very big on auction. I actually try to stay away from auction-driven games, but this one is fun, trust me. Just like in Sushi Go where you're collecting cards, in this game you're gonna be collecting tiles, and the type of tiles you're collecting and so on will generate points depending on different combos. So for example, the more you have of a certain type, the more points you're gonna be scoring, exponentially speaking. Or if at the end of the round you don't have at least one of a certain type, you're gonna score negative points. Or if you're the person who has the most of a certain tile, you're gonna score a certain amount of points. If you had the least, you're gonna score negative points. There is also a tile that works a little bit like the chopsticks in Sushi Go, where you're basically gonna be swapping this tile with another tile in the market, so you can select exactly what you want from the market and steal it from the auction. But also beware, there's gonna be negative tiles that are gonna force you to discard some of the tiles from your active pool of tiles that you collected so far. So you need to be careful about what's in the market. Now the difference is, while in Sushi Go you're gonna be drafting cards from cards passing from player to player, in this game you're gonna be auctioning to win all the tiles that are in the market. And how you do that is with some specific tokens. At the beginning of the game, each player will have 3 tokens, and these 3 tokens will be distributed equally so that you have like a high, a low and a medium value one. I think the values goes from 1 to 15. And during each turn, you're gonna have 2 choices. Either drawing a tile from the back that is gonna be added to the market, making the market richer and richer, or you can invoke Ra, forcing an auction. Now the fun thing about this game is that you're only allowed to participate in the auction once. So once you trigger the auction, the player to your left is gonna decide if they want to pass or participate with one of their tokens into the auction. But this is gonna be their final choice. They will not have another opportunity to join the auction or even bid higher in a later moment for that specific auction. The second player can do the same, pass or outbid the previous player, and so on. Now whenever you're invoking Ra, you're gonna be the last one, having the last dibs on the actual auction, so having the last word on it, and that is an advantage. But another thing that you do when you're invoking Ra is that you are forced to at least bid 1 token if nobody else did. So if everybody on the table has passed and didn't want to win the auction, then you are forced to spend 1 of your token to win the auction. This means that you probably triggered the auction when nobody wanted what was in the market, and you probably triggered the auction a little bit too soon. And probably the market is not that valuable. Now the market will also have a wooden token included in the market that you will gain the moment you win the auction. And the active player that is winning the auction will have to replace the token that they used to win the auction with the token that is in the market and flip it face down so that this is exhausted for the round. So sometimes you might want to win an auction, not really because of what's in the market in terms of tiles, but just to get maybe a higher value token. Or sometimes you want to double guess the possibility of winning a very rich market because the token that is in the market is a very low value, which means you're gonna be penalized in the following rounds. So if you win the auction, you take all the tiles in the market plus that token basically. And then you're gonna slot in all the tiles in your player area. Since you're flipping your token face down, it means that each round you're gonna have the possibility of winning maximum 3 auctions. And I say maximum 3 auctions because there is a push your luck aspect to this game. Now, the auction can also be triggered by pulling some specific tiles from the bag. And in that case, an auction is automatically triggered, and it is totally possible for everybody to pass on the auction and not want to win the auction. And in that case, the game will just keep moving on. But there's one thing that you need to keep in mind. Whenever an auction is triggered, even if it was triggered in this way and nobody wanted to win it, a boat counter will move forward. Which means in each round there can be triggered only so many actual auctions before the round is forced to end automatically. So the tendency is wanting a very rich market with a lot of tiles available, but there's the risk that the auction is automatically triggered too many times and you're actually not gonna be able to spend all your tokens because the boat marker has moved to the end of the track and is gonna trigger the end of the round. So you want to be very smart about it, and there is this double mechanic of yes, auctioning and wanting a lot of tiles in the market to be greedy, but also being very careful about not wasting your tokens. That is gonna make it extremely strategic. So I found this game very interesting, very unique, and definitely one I wanna try more and more. It is a little bit on the expensive side, unfortunately, because of all the tiles, and the wooden tokens are probably very high quality. But if you have the possibility to try this game, give it a shot. And most of all, if you already tried it, if you have any thoughts about this game, let me know in the comments below. At position number 6, we're gonna find another one of the more sillier kind of games, don't worry, the heavy strategic stuff is gonna come soon to this list, I promise. But for this time we're gonna talk about Thunder Road Vendetta. And the name already suggests it. It is a ruthless game about eliminating your opponents. Not really, it's a racing game, truly, but it's more fun if you actually start blowing up each other's cars, you know? So in this game, each player will own 3 cars of different sizes, so 1 small, 1 large and 1 medium. And the goal of the game is to win a race, but there's one caveat to that. The race will not have a finish line until at least 1 player is completely eliminated from the board, which means all their cars have been completely destroyed or are inoperable. We'll see what this means, one thing at a time. There is another way to win the game, which is destroying everybody else, completely wiping out all their cars. In that case you win, because you're the last one standing, congrats. How it works is that during each round everybody's gonna be rolling all their 4 dice, and during each turn, going in clockwise order, everybody assigns one of these dice to one of their cars, moving the car of the corresponding amount of spots equal to the amount of the dice. So if you place a die with a 3, you're gonna be moving your car 3 spaces forward. Very simple, right? But the path is full of treacheries and nasty perils along the way. There are cars in front of you, you can decide to step on their cars and trigger a slam. And that would basically push one of the 2 cars, which is usually the smallest one, into one of the adjacent spaces, randomly. And what's bad about being pushed out of a space to an adjacent one? There can be a lot of bad stuff happening. You might end up on an oil slick, which is also push you onto another adjacent spot. You might be pushed onto a mine, which will explode and have your car take one of the 2 damages that it can actually take maximum. Or worst case, you might be pushed onto impassable terrain, which means your car is completely destroyed and wiped out from the game forever. So I wonder, is this the only way to lose your car? Not really, there's more. As I said, your car can take maximum 2 damages. And once your car takes 2 damages, it is considered inoperable. And when your car is inoperable, means that you cannot use, move or do anything with the car unless you repair it first. And to repair a car, you will have to spend a high value die, a 6. But there's more, because whenever you take damage, you are actually gonna flip 1 damage tile. And these damage tiles can be horrible because they can make your car blast off completely off the racing tracks, having your car completely destroyed and removed from the game. But a lot of things can happen when you take damage. There's so many options and they're all bad. And actually taking damage is not that unlikely. You just need a car to basically end their turn behind your car, and in that case, that car can shoot you. Bigger cars are obviously more likely to get hit. It's kind of a balance, right? Because bigger cars are more likely to get hit and take damage, but when there's a slam, they're less likely to be slammed. So each car has their benefits and drawbacks. If they actually manage to hit you, well, you take a damage. Or they may send a chopper helicopter right behind you and shoot your car. And in that case, you might be taking another damage. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can lose your cars, and this is what makes the game super fun and chaotic, because slams can turn into more slams, that can turn into dealing some damage, that can turn into shooting, that can turn into blasting off the road. It is extremely fun. Chaotic, fun, silly, but it's just about a very nice time with your friends, having a great laugh. It is not the most strategic of games, but trust me, if you're looking for an easy, simple game that has a lot of take-that mechanics, this might be on your radar. It's also the right amount of random, because the randomness is gonna hit everybody at some point. I suggest playing these at higher player counts, possibly 4, maybe 3, probably not at 2 though. And that's it for this game. Let me know if you tried it, if you like it, and if you heard about it. I think it was also a not so old release either. But now let's go to the next game. The next game I want to be talking about is actually a solo-only game, and it is called Black Sonata. It is a game that mixes hidden movement with deduction, and it is set in the Shakespearean London time. We're gonna be hunting for the mysterious Dark Lady that is the protagonist of some of Shakespeare's sonnets. In this game you're gonna be moving throughout London and trying to track down the Dark Lady, as I said, and basically you're gonna do so through a deck of cards. So each card will have a symbol, and each symbol relates to one or more locations on the London board. So every time you're gonna be trying to understand where the Dark Lady is by following all the possible movements linking the symbols to the actual locations. But since each location has several symbols and each symbol is tied to a lot of locations, you will never be, or almost never be, 100% sure of where the Dark Lady actually is. On your turn, you can either move around the board and try to follow the Dark Lady, or you can search the Dark Lady in your location.
I will say, describing this game always feels like so controversial. It is creepy. It is creepy.
And if you're searching for the Dark Lady, you're gonna be hoping to find her silhouette behind the location card. If you found the Dark Lady, congrats, you're gonna be getting one clue towards actually finding out who the Dark Lady is. But then she's gonna flee around in London and it's gonna be harder to track her down again. Now you're gonna be needing a lot of these clues to actually find out who the Dark Lady is, because the objective of the game is finding the 3 symbols that are linked to the Dark Lady. Each Dark Lady is linked, as I said, to 3 symbols, 3 aspects, just like, for example, is married, has kids, is a writer, and so on. And that is gonna help find out the actual identity of the Dark Lady. Now, these clues are gonna be helping you deduce, through logical deduction, what could be the possible symbols behind the Dark Lady that you're gonna try to identify. And with enough clues, you're gonna be able to pinpoint exactly the 3 aspects and try to confront the Dark Lady, which is another option. When you're searching for the Dark Lady, instead of getting a clue, you can confront her and end the game. If you're right about the 3 symbols that you identified as the Dark Lady's identifying symbols, you win the game. Otherwise, you lose. It is quick, it is easy to set up, and it has a double layer deduction, because not only the deduction about the hidden movement, but the deduction also about the aspects of the Dark Lady. So deduction game lovers will absolutely have a blast with this one. Now, I will say the base game doesn't offer that much replayability, or at least variability. You can replay it a lot, but it doesn't have that much variability. The game is gonna be more or less always the same. But that's why there are 2 expansions out, the Fair Youth and the Strange Shadows. I only own the Strange Shadows, but each expansion comes with 4 different modules that you can integrate in each game of Black Sonata, mix and match to have more dynamics, different dynamics, increase the difficulty, have different ways in which the Dark Lady moves, works, and so on. So there's a lot of content in these expansions that are gonna make the game feel different every time you actually play it. And since the meta deduction is what makes this game very interesting, you can even add even more deduction layers to the game with these expansions. I have a lot of playthroughs of this game on my channel. I tried all of the different modules in the Stranger Shadows expansion, so you're gonna find all of these playthroughs with the how to play in the first one, base game, at the link showing right now at the top right corner. So if you're curious about this game, I hope I made you curious, because it's a great game. Check it out there. And let me know if you heard about Black Sonata, what do you think about it? And if you like deduction games, why not? So from now onwards, all the games are gonna be kind of leaning into the medium heavy Euro kind of game, so you already know what to expect. In the past few months, I've really loved exploring a little bit more of these Euro game style games, and I've really enjoyed playing all of this. And I would say these are almost all the same level of awesomeness, and the reason why they're ranked 4, 3, 2, and 1, it is purely and solely based on personal preference about maybe the production, the theme, some of the mechanics, but they're really interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter the position, they're all super awesome. So let's start with the first one and let's talk about these medium heavy Euro games, shall we? The first time I want to be talking about it is 𝗪𝗧𝗪, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is a game about exploring the solar system and finding alien species. It is a pretty recent game, and one of the most unique features of this game is the solar system spinning board. Yes, because at the center of the board you're gonna have a massive solar system, which is basically comprised of 4 concentric sectors, 3 of which can spin around. And several different actions in the game can trigger the solar system to spin around. And you want to be mindful of that, you want to be strategic about the spinning of the board, because you're going to be wanting to move into the solar system and use the spinning to your advantage and not let it damage your plans. In this game you're gonna be playing cards or taking actions over 5 rounds to score the most amount of victory points. And during each round you're basically gonna be taking action until you kinda run out of resources. And I would say the cards are a big factor in this game, because they not only allow you to perform some actions, but they will also maybe introduce some missions, which can be end of game scoring, or basically some extra actions that you can take triggering some of these missions. Some bonuses really. So during the game you will be launching probes from the Earth and making these probes move out in the solar system, trying to reach some of the planets in the solar system. And once you are on one of these planets on the solar system, in the spaceport, you're gonna be able to orbit around the planet or land on the planet. And each of these two things will give you different benefits, and usually a lot of victory points. As I said, in the movement of probes in the solar system, you wanna be mindful of how the solar system actually spins and using that to your advantage. Another action you can do is scanning the solar system, and when you're doing that, you're basically collecting data from the sectors in the solar system, and that introduces some sort of area majority kind of mini game, because you're gonna be claiming some presence in some of the sectors that you're scanning, and once each of these sectors is completed, there's gonna be the scoring, and the person with the most presence in that sector is gonna gain some benefits that usually are either alien traces or victory points. Last but not least, by scanning you're taking data, and you're gonna be using this data to power up your computer. And once your computer is full of data, you can flush the data and analyze them, gaining you some even more alien traces. In the meantime, during the game, you're gonna be collecting some technology tiles, and these technology tiles will help you improve the efficiency of some of the actions you're taking, making them more powerful or cheaper to take. I spoke so highly about these alien traces that you can get by landing on the planets or scanning signals or analyzing data. But what is it about these alien species that makes them so unique? Well, the other very unique aspect of this game is that in each game you're gonna be playing with 2 randomly selected of the 5 alien species included in the base box. From the moment some of the alien traces will be discovered for some of these species, you're gonna be flipping and revealing which one is the alien species you're actually gonna be playing with, because until then these alien species will be hidden, and these alien species will introduce new ways for you to play the game. It's gonna introduce new cards, new mechanics, new mini objectives to kind of achieve, but most importantly, a lot of different ways to score even more victory points by discovering alien traces. So alien traces is really one of the biggest ways in which you can actually score points together with landing on planets. But the extra flavor, the extra rules added by all of these alien species can make the game feel very unique every time you play it. Now, if this game is so amazing, why is it only 4th ranked on this list? Well, I have a couple of remarks about this game. The first one is that the scoring of the areas for the scanning of signals, the area majority that I talked about, it is not very well balanced in terms of player count. So if you're playing at 4 players, then surely you can trigger that many times during the game. But if you're playing even just at 3 players or even 2 players, the scanning action becomes way less lucrative, because it is hard that you're actually gonna be able to score these sectors. So sometimes you might wanna drift away from the scanning action altogether. So I wish there was a little bit more balance or different mechanics for that. I know there are some house rules for that. I'm still trying to find my balance with house ruling that, and if you have any suggestions about that, let me know. But yeah, I just wish the scanning would have been a little bit more balanced at all player counts. The second remark is that really one of the most fun things about this game is the alien species, okay? And I've noticed in my games that if we're not acquiring a lot of alien traces early in the game, we sometimes end up with one of the alien species being revealed immediately and the second alien species either not being revealed at all or in like the last round of the game where it's basically useless. Because people are gonna try to tend to drain out all the possible spots in the first alien species before moving on to the second species. So I wish there was a way to kind of balance out the way in which these work so that you're actually revealing both of the alien species pretty early in the game, let's say by round 3. So I will explore ways to actually make this happen and motivate people to actually, reveal more alien species, because I think that's my favorite part of the game. And I get very disappointed when we don't reveal the alien species in time, because the mechanics for each of these alien species are fun and interesting. The last thing, but this is just my personal preference, you're constantly starved for resources all the time, and I don't like that feeling. This is my personal thing. I prefer some of these games where you have a lot of resources but you need to be like really mindful about how you're spending them, but you have a lot of options, so you need to choose the right option for you in the moment, and not the kind of games where you're basically constantly starved for resources and you're basically locked out of a lot of options because you don't have enough resources. And this is also why in this game having income very early is very important. During the first round or the first round, you really want to boost up that income so that every round you're gonna get more resources. But that being said, this is still a great game. I still own it, I will still play it more and more, and I'm actually excited about the expansion. More alien species, and there's apparently gonna be some mechanics to kind of like speed up the start of the game. Next up we have another huge one. At position number 3 we're gonna find Galactic Cruise. We're still talking about space, but this time we're not launching probes and analyzing and finding alien species, but we're sending people to have fun. Do a nice activities in space, you know? Let me start by saying that the production value of this game is insane. It looks stunning, it is amazing, and if you're familiar with like Lacerda style type of production, this is what you can expect. Beautiful, organized, neat, clean. This is a worker placement game where you're gonna be working towards launching some cruises in space, which is the most important points engine of the game. But before launching you need to be well prepared. First of all, you're gonna be wanting a ship and enough compartments in it to host as many guests as possible. Then, as a travel agent, you're gonna be wanting to schedule a cruise to then later advertise to all the guests. And you want the right type of tourists for your cruise, so that you can optimize the resources, you know, the gains. Depending on how long the cruise is, you need to have enough fuel. Depending on how many people will jump on the cruise, you're gonna need enough food. And don't forget to feed the pilot. And also, depending on how big your cruise ship is, you need enough oxygen for it. And most importantly, don't forget to have enough ads after you launch the ship to actually advertise the space activities to all the guests. That is really gonna score you a lot of points, so important. Each and every one of these many steps will cost you several rounds, several action, a lot of money and some reputation possibly. You will also try to work towards some public objectives because the earlier you fulfill them, the easier it will be for you to do so, and it will make it harder for other players. And these achievements, together with the launch of each new cruise, will be the timer of the game. Once enough of these two things have been done during the game will end. And also these two actions will trigger some middle game scoring throughout the game. So you really want to be focusing on launching cruises and public objectives. The worker placement aspect of this game is also pretty interesting because during each turn, you're going to be placing one of your workers, granting you 2 actions. And the 2 actions can only be either the actions linked to the space you're actually occupying or one of the adjacent spaces, provided that the space you're in is linked to the adjacent space by some developments. They don't need to be your developments, they can be somebody else's development, but make sure to pay them a fee. You can go into occupied spaces by other players, but that will grant the player that has been bumped out from the space some rewards. So you want to be careful about that. You don't want to give too much rewards around. The only reason why this game is ranked in 3rd place it is because it can be a little bit confusing at first. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of ways to do stuff. So much so that in the booklet there is, for example, like, you need more reputation, this is what you can do. You need more resources, this is the actions you can take. And from that perspective, they did an amazing job at the recap leaflet that comes with the game, so that every player has a player aid that they can reference. But I will say, especially the launching of the cruises, it is a 5 steps process that is not extremely smooth at first. It can be a little bit confusing and overwhelming, and it is a pretty long process the first times you do it. Coming up with a nice little story, as I did in this video, can help thematically tie together all these moving parts so that it can make gameplay more smoother and more streamlined, because it is indeed, everything is highly thematic, but there are so many things to keep track on that sometimes you might forget something here and there, you know? And as I said, for this reason and not only, the turns in which somebody launches or is already in space and they need to approach some destination can take a little bit of time, a little bit longer than you wanted to. So I suggest to play this game mostly at 3 players, because we tried it in 4 players and it was not only extremely long, but sometimes there would be a lot of time before the turn would come back to you. Obviously experience helps in that case to make the gameplay smoother, but despite all of these, I found the game extremely satisfying, extremely soothing, beautiful, and the experience was definitely one that I want to repeat many other times. If you have the possibility, try it, and if you've already tried it, let me know what you think about it. It's a very recent release and it was a popular one, so you might have heard about it at least. We're in the hot zone. Silver medal is gonna be assigned to Anachrony, which is definitely a less recent title about moving into a radioactive world that is soon gonna be hit by an asteroid. And you know, because you can communicate with the future. Even borrow resources from it. Yes, because time traveling is a big part of this game. This is once again a worker placement game where you're gonna be acquiring, recruiting workers, placing them in exosuits so that they can go out in this radioactive world and be safe, where they're gonna be collecting more materials to build buildings, or even just take actions to build buildings, or spend their time recruiting even more workers, or acquire water, convert resources, and last but not least, gain some research that will help you build some very important lucrative projects called super projects. The idea behind the game is that you're gonna have a maximum of 7 rounds, but really usually it is less, because another trigger of the end game is when the city is completely collapsed, and the city starts collapsing after the 4th round when an asteroid is gonna hit the city. From that moment on, you will have to come up with an evacuation plan, not only to save your population, but to score a lot of victory points. But every time you go out into the city, from that moment on, it will start collapsing some of the city down until it's completely destroyed. So as I said, a big part of the game is the evacuation plan. Don't worry, because you're gonna know which is gonna be the evacuation criteria for you already from the beginning of the game. After all, you have messages from the future. You know an asteroid is gonna hit your city, and you already came up with a plan. So each evacuation plan will have a certain criteria that is gonna be the basic criteria that you need to fulfill to actually even be able to evacuate. Plus it's gonna have a secondary criteria that is gonna score you a certain amount of victory points and is gonna act as a multiplier. So for example, to evacuate you will need at least 8 water, which is one of the type of resources, and then you will score 4 victory points for each super project you were able to build in your player board. So you wanna be mindful of both of these aspects. And this is one of the most important ways to score victory points. Also, the super projects and buildings you're gonna be building will give you some extra spaces for you to be able to take actions without your workers having to wear exosuits. And the exosuits are also another big part of this game. Because at the beginning of each round, you're gonna be deciding how many of these exosuits you're actually gonna be powering up. And these exosuits can be expensive to power up, so you really wanna be careful about it. There might also be the case in which you're gonna have too many exosuits and they're gonna be wasted because you don't know which actions to take with them, or you don't have enough workers. Even though the rulebook says that this step should be done player by player in player order, I think it's more fun for everybody to reveal at the same time how many exosuits they're revealing, because it creates more chaos, more unpredictability, and it makes it very fun. Another thing that all players are gonna be revealing simultaneously is how many warp tiles they're gonna be playing. So each player, each round, can play up to 2 warp tiles, but they can also be playing 0. And this basically represents some materials you're gonna be borrowing from the future. And be careful, because you really want to pay the debt off, otherwise at the end of the game, you're gonna have to lose some victory points. But one of the main reasons why you want to borrow stuff from the future and then go back in time in later rounds and repay them back is because that is going to help you score a lot of victory points too. To be able to go back in time, you will have to build some specific type of buildings that will allow you to go back in time, but once you do that, you can repay off your debts and score a lot of victory points. There is a downside in borrowing stuff from the future, because during each round, the player with the most of these warp tiles in each of the rounds will have to roll a die and gain some paradoxes. And enough paradoxes will make you gain something called an anomaly, which is a very bad building that you want to get rid of, because it's gonna score you negative victory points at the end of the game. And it's gonna block some spots in your player board, which you don't want. So the game really encourages you to make debts to be repaid in the future to score a lot of victory points. Be very mindful of all your resources and make optimization really your focus. Another great thing about this game is that it is extremely modular. There are a lot of modules in 2 or 3 expansions that you can add, mix and match with the base game, so that you can increase replayability, variability, and you can do really whatever you want with this game. And each of the modules can add new boards, new mechanics, new resources. It is vast. I haven't tried any of the new modules yet, but I probably will, because I like this game so much. And I ranked this game so high because it felt very smooth, very understandable. Everybody could grasp all the rules and the mechanics very quickly without any confusion. So I don't know, as I said, all of these games that I'm mentioning are more or less at the same level of complexity and enjoyability, but I just felt like I like this a little bit more than the previous ones and a little bit less than the one that is following. But let me know if you tried Anachrony and this amazing title from 2019, and if you have the expansions, which one do you recommend? But now it is time for the first position. We reached the top, and another big, heavy Euro game, medium heavy I would say, is awaiting for us. I just want to make sure you know that the last 4 games that I mentioned for me are all kind of tied. They are all super amazing, so just decide based on your personal preference of theme and mechanics as I described it, which one could be best for you. Maybe all of them, but I encourage you to try all of them out. That being said, before finding out what is the #1 game for me in this first half of 2025, I want to remind you that if you want to support me and if you like this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you if you decided to do any of these. I'm even just grateful for you watching this video, honestly. But now let's go into the first position. At position #1, we find Unconscious Mind. And really the reason why this is at the top of the pyramid for me is because I am extremely interested in the topic of, psychoanalysis, dream interpretation, the aesthetic, the lore, and everything. I find the theme very fascinating, let's be honest. That's the biggest drive for me to actually like this game. This game is all about curing patients using psychoanalysis, the technique developed by Dr. Freud, and most of all it focuses on the interpretation of dreams to help cure patients with all sorts of mental disorders. Now I will say this game doesn't really drill down in the theme of mental health, mental disorders, or anything like that. As I said, it focuses most on the fun part of the interpretation of dreams, so don't expect something very deeply related to mental health in this game. It is a worker placement game at its core, another worker placement game where not only you're gonna be taking a lot of different actions in the common board, but most importantly you wanna be mindful of your ink pot movement. Every action you're gonna take is gonna move an ink pot that is on your player board a certain amount of spaces. And that is very important because wherever your ink pot lands, it's gonna allow you to take a lot more actions depending on how populated is your board. So depending on the row where your ink pot lands, you're gonna be taking all the actions available in that row in whichever order you prefer. And that, let me tell you, can lead to a lot of chaining, a lot of different interactions, and a lot of resource creating, spending, converting, and so on. The main resource in this game, except from coffee, which is needed for a lot of different things, it is the insights. There's gonna be 3 different types of insights, which are passion, growth, and freedom. Each insight can be minor, medium, or major. These insights are the resource you're gonna be spending in order to cure your patients. Each patient will come with a certain amount of treatment points that you need to spend to cure them, and 2 dreams. And each of these dreams will have some requirements of insights to be spent to acquire some of these treatment points to actually treat the patient. So you're gonna be spending insight to actually interpret the dream, create some therapy points that they are spent on the patient that is gonna be closer to being cured. And your patient will have 2 levels of being cured. The first one is removing a grief layer, which is like some sort of transparent, overlay card that you put on top of your patient. And once you cure that off, not only you're gonna gain some benefits, but you're also gonna gain some actual passive benefits for the rest of the game usually, or some end of game scoring abilities. So you really want to remove this grief layer as soon as possible to make your actions even more powerful. And then once you have fully cured the patient, you're gonna score even more victory points, getting even more resources, and you're gonna free up a spot for new patients to actually come and be cured. And you keep going like this on and on and on until you cure many more patients. In the meantime, you're gonna be able to play some research cards and publish some treatise that is gonna also score you victory points, and also go around the city of Vienna and take some other actions in the city by following Freud, chatting with him, or even having a very good time at the theater, at the opera, and so on. Everything is extremely pleasing from a side perspective. The production value of this game is also very high. But every time you take an action, it is also super fun puzzle to try and optimize all the different actions so that they blend together and give you exactly the insights you need. This is probably the simplest of the latest 4 heavy Euro games that I mentioned in the last 4 positions, in my opinion. It's between these and 𝗪𝗧𝗖𝗛, I think. The other ones are a little bit heavier, but it's still very rich. And just like in any of these games that I mentioned, I think there are some things that could have been done better. So for example, there are a couple of things that feel a little bit untied to the whole core of the game. So for example, when you're moving in the city of Vienna, it just feels like very detached from the rest of the player board and action board. You just feel like it's some sort of mini game aside that is occasionally gonna give you some points or some resources, but it's not really your focus. Or even how the dreams, treatment points, grief layer, and all the pairing actually work, because sometimes you might not have enough treatment points to actually cure the patient and so on. And that could be a little bit hard to understand at the beginning, but you can grasp it after you play it for like the first hour, I would say. So nothing really major, and I encourage you to try this game. It's amazing, it's fun. The fact that you're using coffee as resource to stay awake and do even more research, it is worrying, but thematic. Have you tried Unconscious Mind? What do you think about it? Now, this is all. These were all the amazing games I've had the chance to try during this first half of the year. I'm hoping that the next half of the year is gonna be just as amazing and I will get to replay some of the games that I mentioned more often. But let me know if you agree with some of the games that I talked about, and let me know which are your top favorite picks of this first half of 2025. I'll be reading you in the comments below and grasping some recommendations here and there. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're gonna decide to explore some of my channel. I have a lot of playthroughs. I mostly focus on playthroughs. So if you like those kind of content, feel free to check them out. Thank you so much again. Ciao, ciao!